Hi, my name is Leonard Koch, and in this tutorial I'm going to give you an overview of LK Lightning 2. So let's get started. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is if you go under primitive up here, and there we have these three: LKL mesh selection, LKL particles from selection, and LKL strands from selection. Let's take a look at the first two at the bottom here. Let's start with LKL strands from selection. You can just hit this with nothing selected and it will simply emit from the center of your scene. And what this will do is it will set up a point cloud with this ice tree on it and a couple of nodes. So let me maximize this. And here's what this sets up. It gives you an emitter, something that creates particles. It gives you the core in which everything plugs in, that plugs into the ice tree itself, and a couple of stylizers, which sort of define the look we see here, this jaggedness. If we render this, then yeah, not very pretty, but it's a good starting point for a lot of projects. All right, so that is this one. What happens if you do this with a couple of objects selected? So let's say you have a cube, and no, let's draw ourselves a nice curve. Well, there we go, and maybe another object like a sphere over here. Now you can just select the three of these and go to primitive. Let's do particles this time. It's going to chew through real quick. And there we go. Oh, doesn't that look crazy? Can go on further in the timeline, and it looks rather crazy actually. And Alt-9 to go to your ice tree. And this is a different setup this time. We have more emitters because we have more objects selected, and each of these has gotten its own emitter. And we have the create filler particles, which creates this abundance of particles, which is a stylizer. And the core is exactly the same, except for this little tag here, where we are not enabling strands. All right, so that's that. Our other feature, and let me just make this a bit simpler here. Let's say I'm emitting some strands from over here, is our mesher, which we have up here. And I can go to this here with our point cloud selected, and it will mesh it. So let that chew through, and there we go. So you can hit Alt-9 with this mesh selected, and there you have your mesher, which takes our point cloud, meshes it, and gives us this nice mesh over here. Take a look at this. Very neat. And there are some options in here which you can see in greater detail in a different video. Okay, so those are our three options here from our primitive bar. Let's see what other sort of compounds are in LK Lightning, and for that we're just going to set up something from scratch, just for the fun of it. So let's keep our cube here as our emitter. LK Lightning always lives in a point cloud, so let's go to primitive, point cloud, and empty. Hit Alt-9, and there we go. Now you're going to create an ice tree, not a simulated one. LK Lightning is not simulated, so just hit ice tree. Now you can start pulling in your core here. Fantastic. It's red. It stays red until you connect an emitter, because at this point there's really nothing happening with it. It's not functioning properly. So let's take a look at the different categories. We have our core here, just our core. That's always what you're going to need. Every other node in LK Lightning always plugs into the core, and the core goes into your ice tree. First and most important category here is emission. This decides from where you emit particles or strands. So what do we have here? We have a cube. We could emit from surface, but let's emit from volume for a change. We've already had surface emission. So we have our emitter here, and let's hit F3 while we have our cube selected and pull it in. Now what we can do is we can connect this to our emitter, and then connect the emitter to the emitter port, the first emitter port here on our core. And there you go. You have your first result. So these are emitters, and they have a lot of options to design the look of your particle and their motion and things like that. If you want to know more about these, you will see that in a future video. The next category, and we can just sort of go along the core here, are the controllers. And they are under control. And what these do is they control the motion of your particles, how they fly, how they do whatever. This is really what gives you control over where your strands and particles go at any given time. So we could take our proximity controller here. That's a very simple one, doesn't require any additional objects. And this gives us control whether particles want to move towards one another or whether they want to move away from one another. So if I plug this controller here into our controllers port, bam, they are really attracted to one another. And if I reduce the strength here a bit, so they're all flying towards one another. Now you can play with cutoff distance and things like that and sort of make that a bit smaller. Maybe reduce the strength a bit further. And now we can really see here how they're sort of tangling towards one another. So that's controllers. The next category are splitters. Splitters allow you to have a particle split apart along its trajectory, which particularly with strands, which is a strong focus of alkyl lightning, is very important. So you can go to splitting and choose just any of these splitters. Let's say split by null. Let's get ourselves a null. Pull it maybe around there, and you can connect the splitter to the splitter port. Nothing's going to happen because we don't have a null connected. So let's hit F3 with the null selected, pull it in, and connect that to the null port. There you go. If we now get close to this here, they're splitting up. Right? And that was the phone. Apologies. Okay, so we have our null here, and right now only a very few are splitting over there. And that's because it is set to split if inside null. So there are a bunch of options here which you can take a look at in another video. I'm gonna go over this in, apologies, that was the phone again. And we're going to go over this in very much detail. All right, so let's see how we can make this work a bit better. You know, you can hit enter and maybe make this rings. And then you can just, you know, scale it up, and every thing that gets sort of inside of those rings is going to split, and it's creating a nice amount of chaos here with the proximity controller, the particles, the strands attracting one another. Very cool. So that's the splitters, and then we have our stoppers. That's the next category. You can just go to stopping and, you know, select any of these. Let's select stop by volume. So let's get ourselves a volume, maybe a sphere. Let's move this over here, and yeah, let's play with this. Maybe over here. And now it's a bit denser. We can pull in our sphere, connect that as the volume, and now if they enter the volume, they are going to stop. So right now they're sort of like this. I plug this in, they're stopping at the surface of the sphere, and I can move this around to my heart's content and things will stop as they hit that sphere. Created a void there. Fantastic. So that's the stoppers, and yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of variety here, as is there with the splitters and with the controllers. Let's get to the next category, which are the stylizers or utility down here. Let's start with the stylizers. Now, stylizers are sort of compounds which allow you to change the look of your particles, change how they're appearing, and sort of manipulate the different parameters of your strands. That can be the orientation of your particles, or it can be, you know, how straight the strands are. And you can take things like the turbulized position node and plug this into here. And there you go. Now you have a sort of jagged look, and you can control this with the strength. Very, very harsh. Control the scale, all that different stuff. You can control it over the length and all these different things. There's also other compounds here. For example, the subdivide strands node, which is a very nice one, which just allows you to have more subdivisions in your strands, and that gives for example, the turbulence here a bit more definition. If I enable this, then it's very granular. Right now it's absolutely not because it's disabled. Enabled, much more detail. And you can just ramp this up, and the performance is still pretty much there. Okay, so we have that. And then there are the utilities, and this is a bit more diverse of a category, as the name suggests. These do a ton of different stuff. There is stuff like the mesher in here, which we took a look at earlier. And there's stuff like for emitting sparks, for creating collision positions when sort of strands or particles are interacting with surfaces, and these sort of provide stuff for other compounds. Then here's configure strands for 3D light, which sets a certain set of parameters which makes LK Lightning compatible with 3D light. There's the skinner, which allows you to skin a high resolution mesh to a low resolution simulation, which is also very neat for this sort of stuff, also neat for a lot of other projects. And then there are these here, which are really just utility compounds, and these allow you to randomize certain values in LK Lightning, or rather almost all values. You can just plug this into any of these things here. For example, we could take the randomized value around rage and plug it into the speed on our emit from volume. And now, there you go. They all travel with a very different speed and are now a lot differently further away from their cube. And that's actually creating a neat effect. So that's pretty much an overview of LK Lightning. You see there's a lot of diversity here. There's a lot of diversity in the different categories, and this really gives you good control over what your strands and particles will look like. There's the basic setups up here, which allow you to do a lot of cool stuff, get started quickly. And yeah, I hope this was interesting for you. I will see you in another tutorial quite soon.